Welcome to Best Ball Study Hall. I am your host, Jeremiah Retzlaff. You can find me on X at Coach Retzlaff1. Let's go over my running back exposures post NFL draft. I have 98 teams here. Right now, outstanding, I have about 60 teams that I'm drafting in these slow draft streets. So there's a lot more outstanding, but representative up to this point. These are the running back exposures that I have. So we'll just take a look at what I have at the top, and I'll just give you a bit of how I feel about each player. Marshawn Lloyd, 27% for me. I'm very high on him. I can trickle down a little bit and lower and flatten that exposure, but I've been enjoying getting Marshawn Lloyd. You don't have to pay some huge premium, and there's such a high upside to that Green Bay Packers offense. I love what Jordan Love has to offer. And of course, we've talked about the four receivers in that Packers offensive game. And then you also have Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. There's a whole lot there offered. Granted, in the way is Josh Jacobs, but I really like the price point, the contingent value on Marshawn Lloyd. Jonathon Brooks, there's been this push-pull. I have him 24%. I've shaded a little bit off him to see if there would be any kind of a dip, but I really don't see any dip happening. So when Jonathon Brooks is back on the board for me, I will just resume clicking for him. Jaleel McLaughlin is third at 22.4%. I've called him Jaleel the Steel McLaughlin plenty. And my bullish outlook on that Broncos backfield, whether it's Javonte Williams, does Sean Payton really love Javonte Williams? Then take into account Audric Estime has an injury that he's dealing with, so he could miss some valuable time and development early on in the season. Samaj P. Ryan, we don't know if he'll be on the roster or not. Could he be? Absolutely. But I like the idea of Jaleel McLaughlin rising from the tide. And of course, you can get him so much later. Chuba Hubbard is my fourth highest exposure running back. That is a play on that Carolina Panthers backfield. I love the Carolina Panthers run game this year. Dave Canales is going to run so much out of that football. It's not even funny. And I think you're just beneficial to get Brooks and Chuba Hubbard just as much as each other. And right now, I have about a 3% difference, but both backs from Carolina are in my top five. Jalen Wright is there, 21%. He surprised me. I didn't realize that I had clicked him so much, but there he is. You love that upside. If just Raheem Mostert is out of the way, I think you see something big for Jalen Wright. Of course, Devon Achane. It's really a play of you have Achane, Mostert, and Jalen Wright. And if just one of them ekes out of the way, then there's such high upside for that player to come in. Now, Devon Achane, I think, has a solid set role. Raheem Mostert has a solid set role. So Jalen Wright is the guy who has to creep in. But all it takes is just one pebble to shift, and then things break through. I have Trey Benson next at 20%. And again, he's just a contingent value play. He's there around the same ADP as James Conner. I just love getting me some Trey Benson. Blake Corum is there at 20%. Again, contingent value. I don't buy into Kyron Williams entirely at Kyron Williams ADP. Now, Kyron Williams will not just necessarily go away. So we have to be realistic when we're clicking Blake Corum. There's a hopium element to it, but I've got a lot of hope for him in this Rams offense. I'm a big believer in what Sean McVay has going on for the Rams. Then I'll go three more running backs, and then I'll switch over to a little bit of drafting. Jaylen Warren at 18.4%. You have just a decision between Najee and Jaylen Warren. Lately, I've been clicking some more Najee Harris because I want to get some exposure to that Pittsburgh Steelers backfield. I have a lot of bullish cases that I can make for Najee Harris. And as I start telling myself those stories, I have to incorporate some clicks for Najee Harris, as disgusting as it may sound. But I do have Jaylen Warren there at 18.4%, followed by Kendre Miller at 18.4%. Again, that's just a contingent play. If Alvin Kamara is out of town, then I've got possibly an RB1 or at least a top 15 running back in Kendre Miller. I like the Clint Kubiak offense. The wide zone running scheme is going to be beneficial for Kendre Miller. It's just a matter of can Kendre Miller be healthy? And then Kamani Vidal, 17.3%. I really like the idea of him getting opportunity in that backfield. We've heard Gus Edwards is hurt. J.K. Dobbins, I love J.K. Dobbins, the player, but post-injury, I'm not so fond of J.K. Dobbins. I like the idea of Vidal being there. I do see Gus Edwards recovering in time for camp, so I'm not so sure this is just 100% an asymmetrical upside for Kamani Vidal. You'll have some flattening in that backfield, and there's going to be somebody else taking the bruises, taking the hits in the Chargers backfield besides just Kamani Vidal. We want somebody to just be the bell cow. I'm not so sure we're ever going to get that with the Chargers offense. I think that's going to end up being some hopium. I know Austin Eckler talked about, hey, the Chargers didn't want me. I didn't want the Chargers to give me 300 carries a year. I wasn't the guy. So then insert, people are thinking it'll be Kamani Vidal. That's not necessarily the case, but those are my top exposures. I am clicking different players all throughout, trying to just differentiate and change. A little further down, I have guys like Tajay Spears, Devon Achane, Chase Brown, Ray Davis, Bijan Robinson, and also Brian Robinson Jr. Brian Robinson Jr. is somebody who I have 11.2% of. I want to get those numbers up on him. And then Khalil Herbert at 14%. There's just that contingent trade value or cut value that people are rumoring and murmuring about. But in the event he's still in that Chicago backfield, I still do like his skill set. And of course, this is an attrition sport, attrition position with Swift and Roschon. I really do enjoy clicking on some Khalil Herbert. One thing you'll notice about my running backs is I am somebody who will draft a lot of rookies at the running back spot just for the fact that it's the quickest position that players can elevate short of a quarterback who just gets snaps from the start. Let's go to this first draft. I called it Pickens Breakout. Here I'm in round 4. I've got Breece Hall, Derrick Henry, and Jalen Waddle in this position where do I go Amari Cooper or George Pickens? I'm going to buy into the George Pickens breakout. In this instance, I'm going to tell myself that story in this draft. So I will clickety-click on some George Pickens here. Amari Cooper, though, is another player that I want to get my numbers up. He can be an easy player to patternistically avoid or not see there sometimes, but we have to understand he's such a splash player. Amari Cooper does nothing but produce. So in another draft, and I talk about this all the time, in another draft, I will go Amari Cooper because I want to get those numbers up. But for the story that I have for this team, with Breece Hall, Derrick Henry, Jalen Waddle, I'm trying to even up my position at running back and receiver. We're just 4 rounds in. I'm going to click on some George Pickens. And also, in this part of the draft, I've been going a lot of, and Zay Flowers isn't here right now, but I've been trying to do that Zay Flowers, Lamar, Mandrew stack. And I want to make sure that I'm not getting too much exposure to the Ravens in this spot, in this area. Granted, I have Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is just somebody different that I have right now. And I like doing that, doing something different, clicking on Derrick Henry there. Now let's go to another draft. This was from Best Ball Night School, where Ed advised me on this team. I'll read off the team. It's a 2-3-5-2 team so far. I have CJ Stroud as my quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, Raheem Mostert are my 3 running backs. So I started strong at running back. My receivers, Stephon Diggs, Christian Kirk, Hollywood Brown, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks. So good Packers exposure. We love the Packers offense. I talked about Marshawn Lloyd earlier. I love Green Bay this year. Whether I have love or not, I'm going to put some Packers on the squad. Then I have Evan Ingram and Dalton Schultz. Now a move at the 127 and the 138 picks. I had deliberated between Wicks and Schultz, and Ed had advised me, hey, push Schultz, go for Wicks, get Wicks as your 5th wide receiver, and then you can push and end up with Dalton Schultz. And that's exactly what happened. I went Dontavian Wicks at 127, and then Dalton Schultz, who has an ADP of 129, was there at pick 138 for me. So there was a slight fall. So good logic there, Ed. Thank you. And now I've got a team set up. I'm in another spot where which running back do I go? I have Jalen Wright, who I want and queued up here in this situation. But the thing is, I have Raheem Mostert. So my running backs again are Bijan, Taylor, and Mostert. And as I'm at a 2-3-5-2 build, I don't so much love the receivers in this range. So I'm all about the running backs in this range. And part of the exposures, Jalen Wright was one of those players that I spoke to. I have plenty of. I am going to go towards, in this spot, some Kamani Vidal. So you're always trying to hammer and flatten across your positional exposure. And in this spot, what presents itself is Kamani Vidal or Jalen Wright. Of course, I could veer towards Tyler Algier, but remember, my squad has Bijan Robinson. So here I have with Bijan, Taylor, Mostert. I'm not going to go Jalen Wright because I'm not trying to necessarily force two running backs on the same team. So I'm going to click Kamani Vidal here. All right. In another instance, I wouldn't have Bijan on my squad, and I could click Tyler Algier at this ADP. And then in another instance, I wouldn't necessarily have Raheem Mostert, and I'd be able to allow myself to take some Jalen Wright. So let's go to another draft. This one says D-Hop. Love me some DeAndre Hopkins. So let's see what logic I have going with here. I have no quarterbacks, one running back, four receivers, one tight end. So, hey, I'm looking to push the running back exposure. My anchor running back here is Travis Etienne. My receivers, Tyreek Hill, Malik Neighbors, DJ Moore, and Keenan Allen. My tight end, George Kittle. I've clicked quite a bit of George Kittle today. I want to make sure I get my numbers up on him. And then what I have at the top of the queue, who I'm interested in my queue, and then I'll read off who's at the top of the ADP. I'm interested in JSN and DeAndre Hopkins. And then, of course, there's Brian Thomas Jr., who's right under DeAndre Hopkins, Deontay Johnson, Keon Coleman, and then the running backs that present themselves here are David Montgomery and Aaron Jones. I'm not so interested in adding a running back here, although I do love some David Montgomery. I've had a lot of zero RB builds where David Montgomery is my first running back. So here in this instance, there's also Evan Ingram on the board. But since I have an elite tight end in George Kittle, and I have plenty of exposure to Evan Ingram, I am going to go towards some DeAndre Hopkins. Now, the thinking is, you might say, wait a second, if you have Etienne, why not get a little bit of Evan Ingram? But I want to work the other side of that Jaguars and Titans Week 17 game. So I'm going to click and add to my squad DeAndre Hopkins. Part of that is just some differentiation. I know on Best Ball Night School, Ed and I had talked about just different combinations of Jaguars players, whether it's Kirk and Ingram, is it BTJ and Ingram, the different types of players, Etienne and Ridley. There's all different combinations that you can have, but also when you merge them together, the Titans and the Jaguars, then you have even more different combinations that are possible that are out there. So my combination for the Jaguars and the Titans so far in this team is Etienne paired off with DeAndre Hopkins. So I'll read this squad again. I have 0 quarterbacks, 1 running back, 5 receivers, 1 tight end. My 1 tight end is George Kittle. My 1 running back is Travis Etienne. My 5 receivers, Tyreek Hill, Malik Neighbors, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins. And I can look later for Caleb Williams because I have 2 Chicago Bears receivers in Moore and Allen. And then, of course, I can look towards DeAndre Hopkins with Will Levis. And then, of course, on top of that, if I want as well, when I'm searching in the Caleb Williams range, I can also look for some Trevor Lawrence to go with Travis Etienne Jr. So let's go to another draft. See what else I have here. Eckler Not Cooked. So I love some of the titles, the illustrations I put in my mind for myself for Best Ball Study Hall here. This is a 2-2-5-1 build. I have 2 rookie quarterbacks, Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. I love Jaden Daniels. He's either my highest or second highest exposure quarterback, both pre and post NFL draft. Caleb Williams there. I love some Chicago Bears on my squads. My 2 running backs, Devon Achane and Zach Moss. Zach Moss is just a different click for me. I'm trying not to be predictable. I'm trying to flatten out my exposures. And my lower exposures, I'm trying to bring up and rise up. I love Chase Brown. Between Chase Brown and Zach Moss, I have more exposure to Chase Brown. But here I am doing something different. You know what you know, and you don't know, or you know what you don't know. So in this instance, I understand that I may be incorrect on my outlook on the Cincinnati Bengals backfield. So why don't I just have some humility and click on some Zach Moss? My 5 receivers, Tyreek Hill, Malik Neighbors, Terry McLaurin. There's Terry that goes with Jane Daniels. Roma Dunze is there with Caleb Williams. And then DeAndre Hopkins is my 5th wide receiver. Pretty wild that we can keep doing this. 5th wide receiver, DeAndre Hopkins. And then I've got stud Trey McBride. So I really like my team. And I titled this Austin Eckler Not Cooked. What I have presented for my team, since I have Jaden Daniels here, to go with a 3rd running back, I am going to click on some Austin Eckler. I spoke to my running back exposure, how I had some Brian Robinson Jr. I think it was 10 or 11% that I mentioned. I want to get Brian Robinson Jr.'s numbers up. 1 for 1 in a vacuum, I like Brian Robinson Jr. more than Austin Eckler, but I do the buy-in for how this squad is building to get some more exposure to some Washington Commanders. And another beauty is I'm not running into too much week 14 trouble, as the only week 14 buys that I have right now are the Commanders that I have on my squad, Terry McLaurin, stacked with Jaden Daniels. So I am going to click on some Austin Eckler. Now, what I am passing up at the top of the ADP board are Adonai Mitchell, Dontavian Wicks, Jerry Jeudy, and since I have 5 wide receivers, I'm okay passing on all 3. I love some Dontavian Wicks, but I want to go along with my team build here. Let's do one more draft. I have best ball, study hall, Dotson, grossness. So let's see what I'm talking myself into. I have another Jaden Daniels team. It's a 1-5-4, 0 tight end squad. My running backs are Bijan Robinson, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Swift, and Tajay Spears. I love that running back room. My receivers, Jalen Waddle, Cooper Kupp, Hollywood Brown, Rome Odunze. Now, when I took Jane Daniels here, it's coming together. Jane Daniels has a 102 ADP. I took him with pick 113. So he passed a little bit past ADP. And I don't have anybody intentionally in front of Jane Daniels built. So the value presented itself in this draft. So I'm here at pick 128 with an ADP of 135. I have Jahan Dotson right in front of me. Now, I do like in a vacuum better Josh Downs as a receiver. Between Gabe Davis and Jahan Dotson, it could go either way. Gabe Davis is an excellent best ball receiver. And then to my team build, Brock Purdy doesn't really match up to my team build. But then Tua is there at the top. So I have made a note to myself about Jahan Dotson. But now I'm seeing here I have Tua Tagovailoa in my queue. So what I'm going to do to pick 137, I am going to push Jahan Dotson. And I'm actually going to fill in Tua Tagovailoa. So I made a note to myself. And now as I'm giving this a finer look under the magnifying glass, I'm going to click on some Tua. So he is week 6 bye week. Jane Daniels is there for 14. So I have 2540. So I had a plan and a note to myself. And as I put this under a finer scope, I now have Daniels and Tua. My running backs, I love reading these guys right here. Bijan, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Swift, and Tajay Spears. Then I have Jalen Waddle, Cooper Kupp, Hollywood Brown, Rome Odunze. I don't push for a 5th wide receiver. Part of my inclination to go towards Jahan Dotson for the note that I made was my thought towards I want to make sure I keep my receivers in check and built up because you want to have a robust receiver room. Another thing that happened to me with Rome Odunze and DeAndre Swift, I didn't end up getting Caleb Williams, and that's okay. Look what happened and fell to me with Jaden Daniels. The beauty is now where I'm set, I have pick 137. I'm not really going to have to hold my breath too much. I really do think Jahan Dotson will fall to me another 2 picks. I don't see any team being desperate to go get Jahan Dotson. So I have these backdoor stacks available throughout the rest of my draft. I will have Ben Sinnott, and then I really love me some Luke McCaffrey. So I'm not pressed to stack Jaden Daniels. So again, my team, Jaden Daniels, Tua, Bijan, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Swift, Tajay Spears. Jalen Waddle is my first receiver. He goes with Tua, Cooper Kupp, Hollywood Brown, Rome Odunze. I have no tight ends. I'm going to set and forget at quarterback with my 2. And I'm just going to keep packing laying the bricks between running back and receiver, and then I'll probably end up with 3 tight ends at the end. Uh, I've been Jeremiah Retzlaff. You can find me on X at Coach Retzlaff1. Thank you for tuning into Best Ball Study Hall. We'll see you next week.